Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Talent Optimization Podcast. We are chatting today about inspiring our employees to perform. And if you are in our current Inspire program, you know that we are spending a ton of time on how we are as leaders in order to inspire our staff, because that has such a significant impact on the leaders that we serve, but also on our employees. And so I have a special guest with us today. With Michael Yinger, and Michael will be talking with us a little bit about how we make and manage agreements and a little bit about coaching within that. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tracy. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. And I should say welcome back, because you had joined us a couple of years ago as we were talking about resumes and how to be seen on resumes and all of the fun things.
Yeah, absolutely. Important and still important stuff, by the way, in case somebody hasn't listened to that recently. Resume is still a critical document, but that's not our topic today.
Yeah, but we will link it in the show notes so that you have it and that you can find that there. And, so when we look at how we inspire folks to perform, one of the key things that we always talk about is that staff need to know what winning looks like, right? And even when you're applying for a position, it's like, hey, what would make me win in this position that has me get out of bed and get excited about what I do every day?
Yeah, it's such a rare thing, although it would be nice if we could make it more prevalent to really have that feeling about work. And I think that, all too often we've gotten into this idea that work is just something that we have to do. And that puts it back on managers to create the inspiration so that people enjoy what they do, because we spend a lot of time at work. That's just that's sort of a fact of life. And if you're not enjoying it, man, what a terrible way to spend most of your day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you're listening to this and you're going, okay, I'm in the I hate work camp right now. Right? I hope you're not in that camp, but if you are, I want you to listen to what we're going to talk about as ways that you can make and manage those agreements with, those individuals that you're reporting to, as well as those that you are supervising, because that's something that's so important in what we do every day. So I'm curious, what's the special sauce about making agreements about what it is we're doing every day?
I think that the special sauce is the fact that if we're really honest with ourselves, we're not very diligent about making and then managing agreements. We make casual commitments to do things. We don't put a clear definition around what is it going to look like when it's done and when is it that I'm going to finish it. And so what we're doing is we're creating an out, because the commitment that we're making is really vague. It's something that in the end you can't be held to. The other part about making and managing agreements, at least from my perspective, is that once you and the person who you're making the agreement with come to the agreement, whoever it is that is the recipient of the results has an obligation to follow up on that agreement, because that's the other thing that we do. We make an agreement. Yeah, I'll get that to you by Thursday. Okay, great. I get to by Thursday. Tuesday rolls around the next week and it hasn't been delivered. But I didn't follow up on Thursday to say, where's my whatever it is that you committed to? And so we encourage, in a sense, or we condone this vague behavior. And the net result is I don't feel empowered because no one's paying attention to my work. Or if I'm the one who's expecting something to be done, I feel like you're not doing what I asked you to do, and therefore you're not operating effectively. So it can be a lose-lose where with a little bit of rigor, and I'm not talking about major effort here, just a little bit of rigor, you can make this a win-win, because the person who's making the agreement will have a clear picture of what's expected of them. You, as the recipient of whatever that agreement is, will have a clear expectation of what you're going to get and when you're going to get it. And when that takes place, everybody's satisfied. Your expectations are met. The person who delivered it gets to feel good about having done it. It's such a positive kind of opportunity. And what it does is it takes a lot of the angst out of coaching. Coaching is so tough because I got to tell people this and that. No, you don't have to tell people this and that. It's all about, well, this is the agreement you made. Did you keep that agreement? And if you didn't, what's your new agreement?
Mm-hmm.
Over time, you have an opportunity for someone who consistently doesn't fulfill to then be in a conversation about, well, maybe this isn't the place for you, because here are the things that you've committed to, and this has been your results. It actually can create, in what is often a subjective conversation, a very objective basis to really define what's going on. Now, a key component of this is that, are these agreements in alignment with what the organization is doing? Because then that becomes the whole beauty of things. If the agreements are in alignment with what you're trying to accomplish as an organization, then everybody's in alignment. The organization is all moving in the direction that you want it to move. It's that, the metaphor that often comes to my mind is that organizations can be like an octopus, which is not to say octopuses can't get around, but imagine if you were an octopus and every leg was going in a different direction, what's going to happen? Well, you might spin in circles, but you're not going to get anywhere. And that's all too often the case with these organizational commitments. People just, they don't understand how their commitments fit to the organization. Therefore, they don't understand what their alignment is with the organization. Therefore, they're not aligned. And that's a sad situation. This isn't tough stuff, Tracy. It's not. It's just, it takes a little bit of commitment to it on the part of the individual, and it can make your life so much easier.
And I think so much of this is we make it difficult by the thoughts that we have, right? So the thought is, well, this is difficult. Well, there's no way I can get it done by Thursday. Well, let's go back in time to say you just made a commitment of something that can get done by Thursday. I love to look at accountability as how much of what by when. Yes. And with what, yes. Meaning what attitude am I going to bring to this, right? How much, I'm going to get this report done, and it's going to be this specific report, and that's the of what, but how much. Sometimes you have a how much and sometimes you don't, right? So that how much could be a report over, the last month, right? Of what is the report that is very specific. So let's say it's a P&L. And the key here is you have to define it. If we don't have that definition, that's what creates the murkiness. And that's what specifically creates the hard, because we don't know what winning looks like. And by when Thursday, Thursday's vague. There's 24 hours in Thursday. So Thursday by 4 o'clock, we're in multiple time zones. So I'm in Central, you're in Eastern. If I say 4, is it Central or Eastern? Let's get really clear on what that is. And it's if I'm agreeing to that, then let's, look at what else is on my plate. And so often as managers, we ask for 772 things without realizing we have. And I think one of those things that we need to look at. So for those of you that are I hate work right now, I want you to look at what's on your plate and what's really there. Because when you start pulling it off, you can go, here's what's here. So my obligation is to go to my manager and say, here's the 72 things on my plate right now. There's no way I can get this done by Thursday at 4 o'clock with what's here. Help me reprioritize, because as soon as we get clarity and know what winning looks like, guess what? We can get to work, but we can't get to work if we don't know what we're working on.
Yeah, it's hugely important to understand that. Early in my career, I would say to people, operating from somewhat of a position of ignorance at the time, I would say to people, I'm not keeping track of what I've assigned to you. You need to tell me if I'm overloading you. That's actually a fairly unfair thing for me to do as a manager, because I'm abdicating my responsibility of keeping track of what the commitments are of my people back to them. Write it down. I got Fred on my team,
that was amazing. Right?
These are the 10 things that I've asked Fred to do this week, and by when? Oh my God, he's got 7 on Tuesday. That'll never work. That's also going to really drive people to, or have people understand that you care, that you're paying attention. Right. This is the role of coach can be so critical, because it's not often telling people what to do. It's helping them accomplish the tasks of their work on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis. But the coach has some responsibility in that. The coach just doesn't say, well, go throw that ball and score a touchdown. The coach has got to set it up so that the team is able to do that. And it's no different in business than it is in a sports context, not to drive that analogy too far.
Yeah. I was doing a training with a client of mine last week, and it was how to have difficult conversations. And one of the distinctions that we kept talking about was, accountability to and accountability for, right? When you're accountable to something, you're holding them accountable. And so often as a manager and a coach, we're accountable to getting XYZ done, right? Versus accountable for it means we're actually doing it and getting that box check done, right? And so often it's like, if we hand that off and we don't take any accountability for it being done, if we take the mindset of, even though I'm not doing the work, I'm going to hold myself accountable for it being done by doing the check-in on Thursday at 3, saying, hey, I know this report's due at 4. Is there anything you're still stuck on with it? And,
right.
Hopefully you would do that before that. Otherwise it's like, there's no way we can get it done. And I think the other part of this is don't make false deadlines.
Yeah, right. Ones that can't be achieved. That's just not fair.
Right. Siri's telling me that she doesn't understand. So
well, it's nice to know she's listening.
I know, isn't
it? This can be game changing for an organization, because it creates the opportunity for people to have a better understanding of what's going on, of what their role in it is, and perhaps to even be more effective and efficient. If somebody's consistently not delivering what you expect of them, is it because you're giving them too many things too fast? Mm-hmm. And should you reapportion the work? We all know that organizationally, generally, we're set up that there's more work than there are people to do it. That's understood. If you're not having to chase things that aren't getting done because people have commitments and they're honoring those commitments, and you're tracking them to those commitments, you're probably going to take some of the waste out of the system. It's going to make it a little more efficient and effective, not to mention just changing the whole culture, the tenor of the organization. If people aren't afraid because they're overcommitted and they can't deliver, and they're going to be punished or something for not getting everything done, because there's a difference. Is this a stretch, or is this something that needs to be done? And, how do you set those priorities? I mean, you said it a couple of minutes ago. This is an opportunity to reevaluate priorities and say, well, what am I asking people to do? And does it really need to be done? And it doesn't really need to be done by Thursday.
Right. Because if it doesn't need to be done, let's take it off. And I think the other thing with deadlines is when you start to pay really close attention to what it is. I know one of the things that we look at, with our staff and our clients all the time. And it's something that I'm told so often is, Tracy, you have this way of removing barriers and catching us in the spin. So we stop spinning and start working, and it moves everyone forward. So with that, how do you catch the spin when nothing's getting accomplished, but you're working really hard to do something? It's frustrating. Yeah, so, right. Some of this deadline, and managing these process and putting in, those speed humps, so to say, is saying, hey, what's going on? How are you doing with it? It also gives you as the leader the opportunity to put eyes on it and be like, yep, that's exactly what I want. Amazing job. Keep going. That gives them a boost, or that's not quite it. Especially when it's the first time they're doing it. Hey, I probably didn't communicate that effectively and didn't realize that. Let's cycle back, get you better direction so you know what winning looks like so that we can still hit the deadline.
Well, you touched on something there that is so interesting. There's an article that was in the Harvard Business Review just recently, and they did a webinar on it around performance management. And one of the key takeaways, at least for me, is that people learn from positive reinforcement, because that changes the way your synapses associate behavior with outcome. And the example that this guy uses as sort of intuitive was a football coach, Tom Landry, 50 years ago, recognized that his players perform better when he showed them video of the things they did right rather than the things that they did wrong. Because that was the old tradition. You watch the game, you get, they bust your chops, it's criticism. He recognized, have people see what is right, have people understand how I feel about your performance so that they can then internalize that, learn in a different way. All this ties in with this making and managing agreements, because I'm going to feel better about myself if I achieve the agreement that I made, because now I can point to that as a success. And as a manager, I can point to that as a success on your part. You did a great job. You just demonstrated this. You did a great job on this report. And, the next time, what would make it more successful? Would you need more time? Or, have you created a template? There are all kinds of things that you can do to reinforce the positive behavior, as opposed to pick at the, perhaps the negative behavior, which just turns people off. We know that, it's people just, after a while, negative reinforcement doesn't work.
Right. And I think you just said, about you did a great job on this report. I would even push you further to say, what about the report is great, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it the analytics and the time frame? Is it the fact that you put it into 5 bullets so I knew exactly what's happening? And then you did a recommendation session so we know exactly what the next 3 steps we need to do to get XYZ outcome? Like, what made that report great? So that they know, hey, these are the things that I need to keep doing in the rest of my work, much as we do with the negatives, right? We get really specific with the negatives, but we don't always get that specific with the positives, because that's what we're going to keep doing. Again, let me know what winning looks like, and then I can hit it.
Yeah. And again, the science of the human mind shows that we respond better to the positive reinforcement than we do to the negative. The way we learn and is by creating what happens in our brain is these positive connections create changes in our synapses, and that becomes repeatable behaviure. Negative works in a different way. It doesn't have that sort of lasting impact. It's fascinating stuff that, where you start to tie all these pieces together, how we're reinforcing the behavior or not, as well as just the discipline of making and managing agreements. I'll give you a simple example. A friend of mine and I have a daily ritual where we commit to each other what we are going to do. We don't work together. He's on the other side of the country, but we're holding each other accountable for commitments that we make, and then we report on it the next day. And so it's a practice of what am I planning to do? Because stuff happens, right?
Right.
Things are going to come up. I had a great plan for what I was going to do yesterday. And as I was coming home from my walk, I get a panic call from my son, who was at a friend's house whose dog just had a seizure, and they needed me to drive right over there because they couldn't pick the dog up and put him in the car. Well, there went my next 2 hours. Yeah. And yet I have commitments that I've made for the day, and how do I readjust to accommodate that? This all can be very empowering as well. If people, if someone says it, if I say to someone, okay, this is the commitment you've made, yes, and this is what we've agreed to, yes, and this is what's going to look like, yes, and you're going to come to me at this time, yes, then in a sense I can let go, and they are now empowered to get that done. Now, not everybody thrives on that. I get it. Sometimes people want to be told what to do on a daily basis. How you handle different people in different ways. Still, you're creating the opportunity for people to feel more empowered in their work because now they have control over when they do what. You assign somebody, you've got 5 commitments for the week. And as long as you hit the due dates, I don't really care when you work on them.
Right.
Or what order you put things in. Does it make sense to you to work on all 5 at the same time? Or like some of us just work on one till it gets done and then work on the next one? A lot of interesting benefits come from this. Aside from, you talked about the tough conversation. This in some ways takes the tough conversation out of it because it's a pretty clear conversation. Now, it may be tough when someone's not meeting their commitments, but at least you've got evidence. It's not just an opinion. It's, you said this was going to be done and this is what it was going to look like. Is it?
Right. And I think what's important there for that manager too is, are we setting them up to fail? So, if we've put too much on them, kind of that pointed, is it? It's like, well, no, and here's our 52 things. So I think we need to be careful with that. But I also think when making and managing those agreements, that when we do that, what happens is we effectively stop the difficult conversations because we're managing them up front, right? So it's like, if I were to recap the conversation, Michael, and I love this conversation so much, is when we make agreements, that those agreements are clear. They have that accountability structure, which is kind of the, how much of what by when, in what way, meaning the attitude, right? So that's how we're making it. We're checking in with what else is on the plate. And so that we know that we're giving them the opportunity of the prioritization. And then we're also following up when it isn't done, that we're not just handing it off and forgetting what we're doing and what we've assigned out, but we're also taking accountability that if that thing isn't hit, we're following up and saying, hey, what's going on?
Right.
Did I catch what?
Yeah, you captured it. You absolutely captured it. It's a tremendous tool, I think. And again, it does fall to me as a manager to be responsible for what I'm saying to people and capturing that commitment. That's the key part of this, quite frankly, is you got to capture it, right? If we're just having a conversation, it's not written down, then that becomes subject to interpretation, right?
Right.
It's whether you as the manager recap it or you have them recap it, just capture it. That way, everybody's really clear that this needs to be done by this time. How many times you get an email saying, "Hey, I really need this."
Right.
Okay.
Right.
By when? What does it need to look like? Who else needs to see it? And then, as you've said a couple of times, and what about these other things that I'm working on? Where does this fit in that priority? It's so funny how we want to stay away from, and it's human nature, quite frankly, stay away from this commitment because it gives us the illusion that we've got some flexibility. And, if we don't make a commitment, we can't be held to it.
Right.
How about that? Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about avoiding responsibility.
Right. Right. For sure. And I think that, as we kind of start to land our conversation here, that, what's the key takeaway for executives listening in today? That might be it. But I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway is that it's possible to engage in a coaching conversation, and it's beholden on you as the manager, as the coach, to ensure that you are setting clear expectations and you are receiving clear commitments in return, and then you are managing those commitments. It's making and managing agreements, not just making agreements, because if you don't manage them, what's the result if you don't hit them? So that the responsibility, the takeaway is make the agreements and then manage the agreements that you make. That way people will have a better understanding of where they fit in the organization and how they're doing in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your takeaway for our HR professionals listening in today?
I think the challenge with this kind of a concept is you do need to get some organizational buy-in. I'm not saying this is a major change, but of, like you got to redo how you run as an organization. There's a cultural aspect to this. And it may be that your managers need some coaching themselves in terms of how to have these kind of conversations. And so there are training programs around for these making and management agreements. And I bet you have one, Tracy, not to give you an unnecessary plug, but I'm sure that this fits right in with your lexicon. Give the people the support that they need to be able to do this. That as a manager, I'm probably making and managing agreements with my boss that I would then expect my boss to be managing. And does everybody understand that this is the way we're going to run things? You can start it small. You can start it with a department, just, internally. And then what's going to happen is that by word of mouth, as you're successful, as you're achieving success with your people, others are going to say, what are they doing? And how do I get in on that? This one can become viral without everybody having to go to school or any of that kind of thing. You can embrace this and you can move forward with it. And I believe really drive some success.
Absolutely. And, I just want to put a little kind of ding in here for HR to really think about performance appraisal time, which you're not in that cycle right now, probably, but you are managing your leaders to get those things done. You're doing that every day with so many things. This is a tool you can pick up and utilize. And as your organization starts to use a productivity tool, whether it's Trello or something like that, many of our organizations are using EOS, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
whatever they're using, this fits beautifully into that of the accountability and performance management. So with that, Michael, where can our listeners find you?
I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, Mike Yinger. You can find me. I'm happy to connect with anybody who's interested, and we can engage in a conversation as appropriate. My email is michael.yinger@custsol.com.
Yep, and we'll put all that stuff right in the show notes.
But LinkedIn is probably the fastest way to get a hold of me. I'm on LinkedIn several times a day, keeping track of what's going on. So happy to connect and be in a conversation.
Awesome. So thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have not yet checked out our coaching programs, we do have a new coaching cohort that starts each month, and we would love to have you in that. And I know Michael has some programs as well. So whatever is the best fit for you, we would love to have you. And with that, have a fantastic week. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.